Get above this city. We found a place in the tasteless living. Oh, oh, we get above this city. We found a place in the tasteless living. Oh, oh, we get above this city. We found a place in the tasteless living. Well, let them move on away.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you're watching this. Welcome back to the 93rd episode of the Since I Was Young podcast for all things Heart or Midlothian. Join you as always in myself, Ewan Ramsey, and my co-host Alan Scrimger. We do hope you're all good and well. And Alan, how are you today on this fine Wednesday morning? Is it Wednesday? I've lost track of the days with Hearts like numbing my brain this past week.
Mate, you're asking me what day of the week it is. I've been working night shifts. I don't even know where I am right now. But no, to answer, yeah, I'm better, but yeah, well, I'm sure we'll get into it as to why the last few days have been rather interesting as a Hearts fan.
Almost as if you just put a plaster on a really deep cut that's been there for fucking years and you don't know how to get what's to sort it out. But as Alan said, we're gonna dive in to the week's I don't even know what to call it, but we're gonna dive into it anyway. Obviously, as we speak, we're recording on a Wednesday, the day after Hearts have progressed into the semi-finals of the League Cup. So I guess we can take that as a positive, where we beat Kilmarnock 2-1 in the dying embers of the game. We'll also touch on the rather disappointing defeat to St.Mirren a few days before, just at the weekend just passed. A bit of fan unrest, which has been going on around the last few days, to mimic myself and Alan. So we'll also talk a bit about that, and I look forward to the next away game, which is away to Ross County at the weekend there, and we'll wrap things up with your episode for today. So as we said, we do hope you are all good and well, and if you haven't subscribed to the Since I Was Young podcast via our YouTube page, please thank you for subscribing. And if you want to check us out on our socials, Twitter, Instagram, all the usual suspects, all the links will be in the description and on screen as always. So we do hope you enjoy today's episode. So Alan, as I said at the start, a lot of things been on there unraveling. A lot of it was the cracks as such being painted over for the time being. So again, it is a bit of a roller coaster being a Hearts fan for this last few weeks. So I guess we can maybe do was it like a bit of each where we can culminate this last week, where obviously the performance against Mirren was abysmal, as I'm sure that we can all agree for all you watching as well. A bit of fan unrest, as we said as well. We've already started to see we sort of shades of what a protest as such, for all like views on Twitter as well. I'm sure you've seen the bed sheets being displayed on the bridge just outside was a Gorgie Road as well, and was a spray paint as well being just outside the stadium, with the large sort of the basis of it being budge out, sack the board, and also from us was it soon enough bring Robbie back. So yeah, so a lot of that it's been down to the performances, in terms of the managerial sort of roles as well, just been very highly unrested. So we'll dive into a bit of that just now. So what's behind your take, Alan? Given last week's performance against St. Mirren, the minor protests as such, and the result last night as well. Again, as I said, bipolar if you are a Hearts fan. So give us your thoughts, sir.
Yeah, I think it's a bit mad, really. It all just seems to have just happened in the last week, maybe 2 weeks, or probably the last week, to be fair. And it's funny because, like you say about the protests and the spray painting and the bed sheets and all the rest of it, I find myself in a very difficult position because I obviously were fan owned and all the rest of it, and fans put money into the club every single month and record numbers and all the rest of it, which is brilliant. Of course, fans of every club have a right to protest. They have a right to voice their views and opinions, and it's, I think, the one sort of positive I'll say I can take out of it is that I've not seen a lot of that directed at Stephen Naismith and the players. I think that's the biggest thing for me. I think if there was protests of people shouting for Naismith to go and all the rest of it, then there would be concerns. I think the board, obviously, as I say, they fans have every right to vent their frustrations at them and budge and all the rest of it. And I understand it. I certainly do understand it. I've kind of over the last couple of weeks kind of been a bit more, not negative, but a bit more realistic. I think like after the Aberdeen game, like we sat and spoke about it and said, this needs to be a springboard, it needs to be a turning point, and then we fall flat on our faces against St Mirren. And after the St Mirren game, I took a lot of time to kind of reflect and thought, right, where are we? Where are we going? And I kind of started to see why people were so annoyed and why people were so frustrated and angry about things. And I thought, you know what, they're right. To be honest, they're right to sort of point fingers at board level. There were obviously people that were out and saying, Naismith's this, Naismith's that, he can't do this, he can't do that. And I get it. There's nothing wrong with being frustrated because performances and results ultimately are down to Naismith and the players, which obviously needs to improve. But I think the board at Hearts is the sort of deep rooted issue. And I think fans, as I say, like last night, before kickoff, they had the banner saying, what was it? Funded by fans, run by
Run by
clowns.
clowns.
We deserve better. And it was. I understood it. Like I say, I totally understood it. And some people might sit there and say, "Oh, it's harsh. It's not going to make any difference. It's not going to do anything. It just makes fans look stupid." And I don't think that's the case. I think it was a game that was televised. Okay, it was on Viaplay, but it was televised. That banner got noticed. It was on BBC and all the rest of it. So that's what fans want to do. They want to make a point and say, okay, we're not happy with what this board is doing with our money that we put in because, and before I go on a big long rant, I'll kind of keep it short. The board and like Anne Budge, when she came on board years and years ago, picked the club up from the ground, and rebuilt them as a business because it was. And Anne Budge said it, I remember in a podcast that I listened to a while ago. She said, when I came in, it was a failing business, and you have to restart that, you have to rebuild that, and she did. To be fair to her, she did. But obviously, the main sort of frustration of the fans is there's too much of a business and not enough on the footballing side, which again I can totally agree with.
So do you think in that sense, so like if you was a good points, was it like you said there, Alan, just to kind of like pick out like a couple just what you actually said there. So like you're absolutely right. Like Hearts were like was it on the brink of not actually being here, and like if it wasn't for her, like I don't think fans forget about that, but I think they take for granted sometimes that she was the sole purpose like of us still being here. So
Yeah.
for me personally, I'll be whatever was grateful for that. And with that being said as well, like I mean, I think just to kind of play the was a devil's advocate, I could be. But do you think, obviously, like she's openly said herself, it was Anne Budge, you know, she doesn't know much about football. Yeah, Hearts fan, but in terms of running a football, well, the club itself, like she didn't know like that much about it. And obviously, since I can remember going back to the days of Chris Robinson, like it, like obviously, like in terms of the business side itself, it was ran like a shambles. Like I still remember like the protests like inside the stadium, was it the pie man out? Obviously, there was a controversy of like he wanted to touch and move us from Murrayfield, like sort of permanently, like etc. So in that sense, as I said, like was it just to play like was a devil's advocate? Do you think maybe like it's maybe be more focused on the business side itself because it's not actually being run properly for Hearts as a football club? Like, well, like I mean, since you and me have had been around and like more like sort of for the older listeners that watch this as well, like they might know better. Like was it if it's not being ran like sort of properly off the park as well, and just to kind of like rather coincide with that as well, like like you messaged me like a few days ago saying like how like for one example how much has been invested into the Hearts was it was it women's side as well, and how much they've like put effort into that, and now they're a really good side. Like from all aspects in terms of the players they've got, the management team itself. So why do you think that's not kind of translated on to the men's game? And like when we're talking about the board as well, like how throughout the last like maybe 10 years, it's kind of almost felt like a familiarity, like in terms of like in terms of the managers we get, in terms of the players we get, like obviously like was with like the Kinley as well. His background isn't really like kind of football focused as such. Like from his background, obviously Savage as well. We've praised him, like but like the odd kind of signing he's not got right. Bringing such people as the McAvoy as well, who worked like like alongside him at Preston as well, like obviously like the shenanigans at the start of the season with roles being changed to technical director, like blah 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 blah. So do you think in that sense that there has almost needed to be like a focus on the business side, and like almost like the football will take care of itself, but this side was of ours has to be more a kind of a focus on in that sense.
I think initially, yeah. I think, as I say, when Anne Budge took the club on and invested the money, it was because the business was failing and it needed to be resolved, it needed to be sorted. So that was the priority. And I mean, the football side, like you say, the football side will take care of itself because, well, we're always going to be playing games, we're always going to be generating money, the fans are always going to be going. So there's going to be money coming in from the footballing side. And Anne Budge, to be fair, she used her contacts and to get people in to help her, and James Anderson with the investments that he's put into the club and all the rest of it. So yeah, like the business side was clearly a priority when she came on board. Obviously now she's been fully repaid. Her investment, she's got it back plus a bit extra probably.
Mm.
And I think I don't want it to sound like I'm criticizing Anne Budge, because I'm not, to an extent. I think the fact that she still has a seat on the board is something that I'm not saying I'm worried about, because I'm not. Like, she's still there because of the contacts that she's brought to the club, realistically.
Mm.
But I remember a while ago, I think it was an Andrew McKinley. It was either when he came on board or when his role changed or something, and he became like CEO. And the statement that Anne Budge put out was basically, I'm taking a step back from day to day running of the club. Andrew McKinley is going to be the one that's doing it. He's going to be liaising with Joe Savage and Robbie, it was at the time. So I think people get, and I know like this sort of goes back to the protests I was talking about and the whole budge out thing. I think people think she's an easy target, to be honest. And, again, it might be because of who she is. It might be because she's female. I don't know. And I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that, because I
No,
wouldn't go
but
there. But it does. It's one of those situations that I think, and maybe this is just me, and I don't know if this would help in any way, probably not, but I would like to know what Anne Budge's role is right now, and how much of a say and an influence she has on things. Because, like, I remember when they took the decision to sack Robbie Neilson, Andrew McKinley was very much the front and center of that. he was very much the guy that came out and spoke to the media and said, we made this decision, we had to make this decision. It was a tough decision and all the rest of it, but we had to do it for, purposes of moving forward, etc., etc. And Budge would have been involved in that conversation,
Oh,
um,
100%.
whatever capacity and whatever influence and decision making she had. But I think that for me is something that kind of it's not cloudy. It's not as cloudy as the managerial situation was at the start of the season, but I think Anne Budge, there needs to be a bit of clarity in terms of what her like what her role is, and maybe I'm just missing the point, and maybe because I'm running off of 3 hours of sleep, it's maybe glaringly obvious, and I don't know. So hopefully somebody can help me out with that one. But like when you spoke about like the women's team and stuff as well, I think it's important to sort of note on that the women's game in Scottish football is still it's still growing, it's still
Hmm.
improving all the time. And the Hearts women's team were miles behind other sides. They're a fairly new team as well. They've not been around for all that long. But obviously the money's been put into that because of it needed to drastically improve, from where it was to then where it is now. They needed to make drastic improvements and quickly to catch up with the other teams. And obviously they've sort of done that, with Eva being there and the new players they brought in. So I think that's been a necessity for Hearts to kind of get that going, because the women's game is growing in Scotland and
Mhm.
in Europe in general. Like it is growing and the following is there. So I think that was a priority of a sense. But I think again, like I said, I think a lot of it was first team levels were sort of getting ignored a little bit because it was kind of like, well, we're Hearts, we've got a decent budget, we'll be up there at the end of every season, be it third, fourth, whatever. Obviously, we've had our championship campaigns, which haven't helped that. But we've always been too good to be at that level, if that makes sense. Like even
Mhm.
when we got relegated in the COVID season, we came straight back up again. It's one of those situations that the club, like over the last 5, 6 years, probably have stagnated a bit. And in terms of like, not in terms of ambition, because the ambition is always the same, but I just think the backing it up and like showing it and saying, right, we want Hearts to be that third force in Scottish football. We want that nailed on every season. The way you do that is by getting there and then building on it. We always seem to be, and I remember I was talking to John about this the other day, about it and kind of saying, it's always a case of like we take one step forward, two steps back. It's constantly like that.
Mhm.
And when you look at it and you say, well, we haven't finished third in consecutive seasons for years, that tells you everything. It's like we finished third, well, like season before last, finished third at Cantor. Last season, you're thinking, right, we finished third clear. We should be able to do that again. And then last season, obviously, the way it panned out, that didn't happen. So it just seems like we're kind of stuck on the sort of bottom, well, not maybe not the bottom rung of a ladder, but we're sort of near the bottom of a ladder, just looking up, going, oh, it'd be nice to be up there, but we never really make that step to go, right, okay, we're getting there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, mate. I mean, so in that same sense, like, I mean, as a alternative, like, was it scenario as such? When it comes to like for the rest of the season, like because obviously Nazy's job as such, it's going to like I can see it being on the rocks for like a large portion of the end of this year as well. Not just like solely down to him, but like with the added bloody pressure like of last night, for example, like there was so much hefty pressure on him, the squad, um, and I can actually see that being like like being a thing throughout the next like sort of month or so. Obviously, with the schedule that we've got for October, like especially like as well, like is going to be hectic. So in that sense, it's just like I kind of talking about the board and where I kind of Anne Budge is as such, like in her role and the Kinley's like I wouldn't say lack of knowledge, but obviously, like, was it the rugby background or a golf like sort of background? Like, I think it was
I think,
one of the two.
yeah, I think he's done a little bit of everything, to be honest,
Aye,
apart from football. But
yeah,
yeah, Yeah,
So
I don't mind McKinley, but I don't have that much faith in them
yeah,
as a collective. If
yeah,
that
no,
makes
no,
sense.
yeah, no, man, absolutely. And in that same sense, would you feel as if if Naismith did get sacked, which personally I want it to actually work. Like I like how Naismith like kind of brings himself across, how he speaks. Like, yeah, granted, some of it can be like a bit repetitive, like at times, but what the manager on earth doesn't repeat himself sometimes every few weeks. Like there's only so much you can actually say, like in
Yeah.
terms of like of a game. But if that were to actually happen, and if he were to actually lose his job, do you think that that's the point where there has to be a change, not only from from the manager role and in terms of what we do in terms of recruitment to actually get that person, but literally from the top down? Because obviously, as you said, and as I said as well, there seems to be a kind of familiarity with who we pick, how we do it, when, which is a quite an like an important part as well. But because like you mentioned as well, obviously quite a few Hearts fans that like are almost like at like what panic stations now. Like obviously going back to when like we sacked like Levine. By then the ship was sunk. When we sacked Robbie as well, some could argue that that was way gone. Like what I mean. Like so from
Yeah.
your personal opinion, would you say that like if that does happen in terms of a whole restructure. Granted, that like I know that does sound quite was it dramatic as well, but would you think there has to be a change at the top as well as the managerial role as well?
I think so. I think you kind of touched on it about like previous recruitment and previous managerial appointments. And I think it's something that I've kind of pointed out recently, and I think I messaged you and a few other people about it. Like, I don't have a problem. Like, I think it was Craig Levine years ago talking about, Hearts as a football club should be almost like a conveyor belt for young players to come through and develop and grow and be in the team. And he also mentioned, sorry, he also mentioned like young coaches coming in and being given a chance and then progressing and having that sort of thing, which in theory is a very, very good idea. To be a club that's seen as like a place where young managers or young coaches can develop and grow is a nice thing, providing they achieve success, of course. But we've seen the managers that have been appointed in that sort of way. And I said this probably before when Naismith was appointed. Every managerial appointment's a gamble. Every managerial appointment is a gamble. But when you've got young coaches like, or unproven ones, you've got Ian Cathro, we all know how that worked. We've got Austin McPhee, we all know how that worked. Got Robbie Nielsen, who did very well, very well. And the only reason Robbie got sacked was because of the end of last season and the way things played out. But even Stendhal was another one. Lots of people say he was the right man at the wrong time, and I kind of agree with that. But
Mm,
I think, and I'm sure we spoke about it a few weeks ago, it would have been interesting to see how that season would have ended if we got to play it out. But the fact is, we were at the bottom of the table, so it is what it is. But like I said, I think the board have this idea and they're maybe stuck with this idea of young coaches is the way to go, young coaches is the way to go. Is it because it's cheaper? Probably. Let's be honest. That's probably one of the driving factors why we ended up with the managers that we've ended up with, and probably why we've ended up with Stephen Naismith in the dugout right now. As much as I love him and adore him and hope that it works, you can't deny he is an incredibly inexperienced
yeah.
manager at this level, and it shows occasionally. The the point as well I wanted to make about it, like the managerial structure at the start of the season, I understand why they did that. I understand why because they had to, because they hung their hat on Stephen Naismith getting the job, and then it was right. How do we fix it so that he can still be the manager even though we're in Europe? How do we do that? Okay, we promote Frankie McAvoy because he's got the coaching badges, and we do it that way. And obviously, it ended up being a bit of a disaster and piling extra pressure on Naismith when he didn't need it because he's already got enough pressure on his shoulders as it is. But as I said to you, I think the board, Stephen Naismith, and the way I see it, Stephen Naismith is. I don't blame him for taking the Hearts job. I don't blame him for it at all. It's a
Absolutely
massive
not. No.
opportunity that he got given, and he's not going to turn around and say no thanks. You know what I mean? He's a manager, like I said, and the way I put it was Stephen Naismith getting the Hearts job is like a learner driver being handed the keys to a fancy BMW. You know, he's not gonna turn around and say, actually, nah, do you know what? I'd rather go and buy a Ford car. Like, you can keep your BMW. I'd rather go and buy a wee banger. I don't, it's that way, and it kind of, as much as I want Stephen Naismith to work, and I hope that it does, and there are signs that it could work, and the players are obviously backing him, like Cammy, who signed a new 1 year contract the other day, came out in the media and said, look, we're with him. We need the fans to be with us. We're all trying to do it. And there were signs, obviously, against Aberdeen that it was working. And then last night, the St Mirren game, obviously, the St Mirren
Yeah.
game is its own thing, but there are little signs of improvements and there are little signs of things happening. But yeah, the board, I'll sort of go back to that. They made a massive gamble giving Stephen Naismith the job. And if it doesn't work longer term or medium term, then they will have to have a look at themselves and they will have to have a look at the processes and strategies that they use to appoint managers. Andrew McKinley spoke about, and I looked this up last night, he spoke about it being a robust process to bring in a manager. And I'm thinking, it was that robust that you ended up giving the job to the guy that was managing the B team in the Lowland League last year. As much as I like Stephen Naismith, and I'm sure he put an interview across very well, and I'm sure he put his vision across very well, you can't tell me that after a robust managerial search and interview process that the man that was best suited to the job was in an office 2 doors away. It
Mm.
just doesn't sit right with me.
Nah.
But like that being said, I'm still backing Naismith 100%. And I know, there'll be people out there that'll be saying, oh, why he's doing that? Have you not watched recently and all the rest of it? The last thing we need is more disruption and more change and more issue. You know, as I said, Naismith is a very inexperienced manager, just been handed the keys to a fancy BMW. He needs to learn how to make it work. He needs to learn how to do it. And
Hmm.
it might be an element of learning on the job, but that again, as I say, we shouldn't be a club that needs a manager to learn on the job, but that's where we are.
Hmm.
So as I say, the players are back in Naismith. They seem to enjoy what he's trying to do, and that's good enough for me.
Yeah. I mean, like you said as well, like I mean, I want Naismith to actually work. Like in what, like I mean, like in the same sense, like when we still had the Robbie here, when he was in a dip, I wanted that to actually work. Like what I mean, because yeah,
Yeah,
some flack was due, some flack like debatable, but in this kind of situation, obviously, like the board have almost kind of was it created it themselves, like like given this huge role to Naismith when he's not got that much experience. But you know, when on the times and the glimpses that we've seen throughout the season so far, and when we've actually been all right, I like this style of play. Like, obviously there is like I do agree with Naismith to some extent, is that there is still echoes of this old was it the Robbie team where like we'll just pass it sideways, play constantly from the actual back, like and then don't have much like was it in the the final third. Yeah, there is still kind of glimpses of that, but I can see that he is trying to do something different and be a bit more aggressive, attacking minded,
yeah,
be more on the front foot, be a bit more with a braver, you know. So I can see that there is a plan there, and like there's a kind of half and half of me where like there's a I know it can work, but then there's the other side that said I hope it works as well because
yeah,
obviously like was it talk is cheap, Like, like it is what you actually do on the actual part that counts. Like as well.
Of course.
But you know, you had to kind of move in to the games itself, like as well, Alan, because obviously again, like a bit of a stop start, which has kind of been like the theme almost throughout the start of the season as well. So yeah, I guess the St. Mirren game is probably a place to start as good as any. Like so obviously with the result beforehand as well, was it beating Aberdeen? Obviously as we said as well, this up and down start, like going into the game, we had a bit more the kind of high hopes, like if that's a relatively like sort of was it the good thing to say, but then that performance, Alan. I mean, I only got the extended highlights, and I know that like you watched the a game in full. God, bless your heart. Um, yeah, like I mean, what was it specifically about that performance that like made the frustrations worse? Because like I mean, we do have these the kind of games where like you not almost like you expect it to actually happen when we go away to like a St. Mirren County, like these was the sorts of places, but there's almost like an expectation of if we get beat 1 or 2 goals, like it is almost kind of like, oh, like it's hard, so like but what was it in particular about this performance from the actual players that you yourself like like found like increasingly frustrating? Because like the amount of the messages and voice notes I found on my phone literally after work was like Jesus. So in that sense, Alan, what made it more kind of frustrating for you? Like, was it after that game against St. Mirren?
I think it's one of those, like we said about the Aberdeen game, talking about how we played a bit more positively. Yes, Aberdeen were not good, but we were good. We weren't brilliant, but we were good. And like I said earlier, you kind of wanted that to be like the springboard, and like the players were talking after that game about, this is a big game, this is a big win, and we need to build, we need to get better. This has got to be the standard, etc., etc. And you know, going away from home to Paisley is not a nice thing for Hearts. I mean, going away from home in general is not a nice thing
Yeah.
for Hearts, but we said last week about the expectations and about, going there and feeling a little bit confident, based off of how the Aberdeen game went. But like I said about Naismith being a young, inexperienced manager, I think there was maybe a bit of naivety from him in terms of his team selection. It kind of baffled me a bit, because obviously Oda went off against Aberdeen, didn't play obviously against St. Mirren. But and it's funny because like you spoke about like the voice notes and stuff that I sent. Yeah, I was sending even more to my brother, and he could probably confirm that. And to be fair, he was sending them back, so it was actually all right. I didn't feel like I was talking to a wall.
Very good.
But we both said in the build up to that St Mirren game, surely the easiest change to make is just replace Oda with Forrest. You know, keep the width, keep the you know momentum going from the Aberdeen selection. And he did more than that. He changed the midfield. I think he brought in Benny. I think he brought in, was it Neuenhoff? Or there
Mhm.
was there was a few changes anyway. And I just kind of thought, like, why? Like I was like, and it's one of those things, like I said before about analogies and stuff, and I saw one on Twitter that made me laugh, and it's bang on. It was about, Stephen Naismith as a manager is playing chess while the rest of the league is playing snakes and ladders. It's true, and I said this before, and this is the one frustrating thing that I have with Stephen Naismith, and probably one of those things that makes people question him a little bit, is that, you know, being overcomplicated. Maybe there's an element of that. If it's your first management job, just keep it simple. Um, but yeah, the St Mirren game went as predictably as an away performance for Hearts could possibly go. It was like watching any away performance for Hearts for the last 2 years, if not longer. St Mirren, to their credit, have had a very good start to the season. Was always going to be a very difficult game, but I expected more from Hearts. As good as St Mirren were, I
Mm.
expected so much more from Hearts, and we just didn't get it. We just didn't have it in us at all. And St Mirren, the goal that they scored was again the most predictable Hearts goal to concede you'll ever see in your life. Xander Clark and Kent, just
Yeah.
there was no communication at all. I don't know if Kent left it because Clark gave him a shout, or Kent left it because he thought Clark was coming for it. But they both just essentially left it and let it go to the back post. And that boy, I think it's Ryan Strain, scored the goal, tapped it in an empty net. And you're like, we shouldn't be giving cheap goals away like that. But it's something that just seems to be happening. Little
Mm.
individual errors. Because aside from that, defensively so far this season, we've actually not been that bad. If we cut out the stupid defensive errors and like the stupid individual errors that we seem to make every game, we'd actually be a solid defense. But then, to be fair to St Mirren, they just kept on it. They kept going. They had a plan. We didn't know what to do. I think we changed shape 2 or 3 times. It just didn't work. Whatever we tried to do just didn't work. And it was concerning. It was very concerning. And that game was, albeit away from home, that game was, like I said earlier, that was the game where I started thinking, is Stephen Naismith going to work? Is this going to work? Because yes, it's early in the season, but what have we seen so far? As soon as we went 1-0 down, I'm sitting there going, well, that's that game finished. There's no way we're coming back into it. And that, as I say, that's the one thing that I kind of started questioning Stephen Naismith and thinking, right, an experienced manager at this time might know something different to do, or might be able to change something and shake something up and make something happen. And it just didn't happen for Hearts. Um, Annoyingly, St Mirren I think they had the ball in the back of the net 4 times, and 3 of them
Mm.
were ruled out, very harshly, to be
Yeah.
fair. One of them was an onside, but it was given as offside, but he was on, and the other one was Frankie Kent supposedly getting fouled, but it wasn't a foul at all. um, so yeah, and like I said to you after the game, it's one of those situations that if we'd lost that game by 3 or 4 goals, we wouldn't have been able to complain,
No.
because we didn't put anything into it, at all, really. The only positive was Benny, played relatively well, which was again nice to see in the Benny Beningame comeback story, which seems to be happening. But yeah, it was not a good day, and it led to a lot of frustration. And I think because people were so hyped up about it and wanting to get a result and needing to get a result, I think that's where the sort of fan unrest and pressure started, because it was like, although this is predictable because it's Hearts away from home, it's still not acceptable. You
No.
know, we've not had a great start to the season in terms of points returns when you talk about the teams that we've played. So that falls at the door of Stephen Naismith and the players. Like I said earlier about the board being to blame for certain things, Naismith and the players have to take blame for some other things. I will say, as I say, the St Mirren game had me very flat after it, and I did start to think, right, what are the board going to do about this?
Mm.
Are they going to be? I'm not going to say they should be pressing the panic button after we lose to St Mirren and sacking them there and then, because I don't think that would make any difference and it wouldn't help. But the biggest thing that I'll say, and again, this is back to the board that we spoke about earlier, the contingency planning. If something went wrong, that's a concern that I have as well. Like we saw last season with Robbie when he got sacked, it was almost like they did it reluctantly because the fans put the pressure on for them to do it.
Mm.
Results didn't improve, so they had to sack him, but they had no plan for what to do after that. They just went,
Mm-hmm.
right, he's away, okay, we need to get someone. And I feel like the exact same thing would happen if Stephen Naismith was to go, because the board doesn't seem to be all that forward thinking and planning when it comes to that side of things. But no, but back to the football and back to St Mirren, we just didn't turn up. We didn't turn up, and Naismith basically said that after the game it wasn't good enough, and we didn't do anything that we should have done. We didn't play on the front foot like we want to. we just didn't impose our style on the game. But St Mirren, to their credit, did, and that's why they won. And that's why they're up at the top end of the table so far because they deserve to be there.
Absolutely, Alan. I mean, again, like from my end, like there isn't really like a huge lot to actually add. Like as you said, like you watched the full 90. I wasted about eight the was a minutes of my life watching it, but you're absolutely right. It was just flat. Like I know it's a relatively easy thing to actually say, but like uh, even from the get go, like we're like it's again it's not just been from like the start of the season. Like it's been like that for like a few years now, where like we almost have to grow into to the game. We can't start off fast and on the front foot. And again, that was a recurring thing with the Robbie. We almost get the reaction from the actual players when we're like a goal or two down,
Mhm.
and even that, like it just wasn't there. I mean, like from the start that you sent me as well, we had about like what, like 70% possession of the actual ball, but only one shot on target. Like
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a scary things to see. Like and
No, I just
yeah, yeah, no, I'm going
no,
to go.
I was just gonna say like the thing with that was it was your typical Hearts. Like I say, it was the slow, sloppy, and shite to coin your phrase, and
Matt, copyrighted.
it was
Thank you very much.
it was predictable. It was just predictable, and that's why it was frustrating to
Well,
coin my phrase.
there you go.
But yeah, nah, it is. It was just so flat, like you say, and then like it's one of those like Naismith talks about, and he spoke about it after the game last night about handling the pressure that comes with playing for Hearts and being a player that has to handle that pressure and knowing how to handle that pressure and those expectations. And that's true, but St Mirren away, like it's one of those games, and they said it. I can't remember who they interviewed after the game. Maybe it was Shankland, or anyway, I can't remember who it was, but they basically said, we don't have a good record there, so it was going to be a tough game. And then obviously last night, going away at Kelly, we don't have a record, we don't have a great record there, so it's going to be a tough game. It's like, yeah, but these shouldn't be tough
Yeah,
games. Like
you're
we
right.
we make them harder than they need to be. Like St Mirren were organised and played a very good game, and I take nothing away from them. But we should have done more, and we just didn't. We just didn't have it going for us. The one thing that I'll say as well before I give you it back, sorry to interrupt you there, was
Not at all.
the the biggest heartbreaking moment for me, and you'll know what I'm going to say, was Natty Atkinson getting stretchered off. Still don't know what he's done. Still don't know what's wrong, but there was lots of different things floating about him, and yet another fullback joins the injury list. The St Mirren fans
Fantastic.
that yeah, the St Mirren fans that booed him off the pitch are absolute cretins, and I will give them no further coverage than that. Um, but yeah, it's gutting for Natty because he's actually started the season very well, and just when you think, is this a breakthrough for Natty? Is this what he needs? He gets an injury.
No.
Um, so yeah, not ideal, not ideal, and it certainly put the crown on the absolute shite sandwich that was St Mirren for me.
And we can add the wrap up there, and probably that could be a what was it, the title for like for this podcast. But saying that as well, to kind of, was it the continuing to the Kelly game as well, obviously with that injury to Natty Atkinson, that put it down to, was it Toby Sibic, who I actually thought played very well. I think that was one of the first things I sent you watching the first, was the 20 minutes of the Kelly game. I like, was it Toby Sibic? I think it's been a bit of a shame that he's not had as much, was it, playing time as he did last year, considering that he actually played very well towards the second half of the season. The team in general, again, it was probably as good as a starting 11 that we'll get right now. Obviously, you had Clark, you had Sibic, Kent, Rose, the Kingsley, who I will say as well to give him his the credit, because obviously we've spoke a lot on it like about him throughout the last few months. He's starting to become a bit more of the Kingsley as we actually knew beforehand. So that's nice to actually see. We had Devlin, Neunhoff, Vargas, Forrest, and Shankland. So again, I thought that was a relatively decent side. And was it Jorge, who can forget that glorious greasy man? But yeah, like I said at the start, sorry, pardon me. I thought the first half was very end to end. It wasn't kind of overly entertaining. I know that Naismith, sorry, was it? I know that Naismith said in his the post match that he thought that we were the better team in the first half. I didn't entirely agree with that. Yeah, like the goal was separated at which you could argue that we were the better side, but it was very end to end throughout the whole game. Like, was it saying that? I thought we were better in terms of trying to get on the front foot. Like well, your typical was it Scottish was a football game. It was very open. It was end to end. Like like whenever one team got the park, then straight away the other team was at it as well. So it was nice. It was kind of nice to see that. Like in a sense, it's not just constantly passing, 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 and then it not was it actually was it they're coming to anything. Um, Obviously the goal was very well worked. I will say that much. Like for
Yeah.
all the things that we've been saying about how shite we've been throughout the last few weeks, I thought the goal was actually very well worked. Like it was in the final third of the Kilmarnock end. They tried to scramble it away, and our our Rolls Royce fucking that's a mouthful. Like manages to like was a pick it up, like just in there was a half, drives it, makes a good pass to Shankland, and then for Shankland to then lay it off to Jorge, and then to actually put in like a really good goal, like very well slotted in the right hand the corner as well. Literally 5 minutes beforehand, like if we had a screenshot of those texts, Grant can get the fuck like literally like there was no literally
Yeah.
word for word Grant can get to fuck, and then he shows up with that. So man can get a brand new 5-year contract extension, like as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, no, it was a very well worked goal. I think it was like 5 minutes before the first half was due to end. So like so it was a good time to get the actual goal. So in general, I thought the team played okay. Yeah, like there were parts of our game that was better than last week, and obviously there are still aspects that we have to work on. I thought, you know, Rails again, like from that wee bit that I had mentioned there, that he did relatively okay. Obviously, like being put up against the cell, what was it the Kilmarnock captain? I thought that was a bit of a like what you trying to do to him,
Yeah.
There's only like yeah there is criticism that he has been due, but like when you're putting them two side by side, you're thinking, "Ah, come on, man, like it fucking was it to give the boy a break, like you know what I mean." But yeah,
Totally.
I thought yeah, exactly, so I thought we did okay. I did like for it that first half as well. Obviously, getting into the second half as well. There is that obvious expectation of yeah, we're definitely gonna throw this away, and then obviously come the in the 70th or 75th was a minute they scored as well. By that point, I was so like I watched the first half. I watched a tiny bit of the second half at the start, had to go and pick up my other half during the second half. So then I had the radio on, which like as we said at the start before we according. I hate the radio, but I love the radio at the same time. Like, you know what I mean? It's just anxiety all was it all round fucking fantastic value. I mean, just to kind of get your like view, Alan. I mean, obviously this game, you know, reeked of just a typical Hearts and like away performance. But as soon as they got that goal back, all square again, what were you thinking at that point? Like, you know, I mean, do you think, you know, if it had gone into extra time and like again, and was it was a different scenario? Do you was it if they had one? Do you think that it like, you know, in terms of what we talked about at the start, like what was it Naismith's role, the board itself, etc. Do you think that would have, as we spoke, was it right now? Do you think that it would have just been a completely different outcome in terms of like, you know, the fans sort of point of view right now to have Naismith out, to have Budge out, the board out, etc. Blah 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 blah. Do you think that would have been a larger outcome, or do you just think that this result has kind of just papered over the cracks for the time it was it being?
Think, like I said it before the game, everybody was negative online and talking about, oh, can't wait for Hearts to lose tonight and, all the rest of it. And like it was said in humor more than people actually wishing us to lose, or at least I hope so. Because if you're a fan that wants your club to lose so that managerial change can happen, there's no hope for you, I'm afraid.
Nah,
But
totally
yeah,
agree.
like I said before the game that I was not going to say confident because I wasn't confident, but I kind of felt like, do you know what? It will be a typical Hearts game that we'll win because of
Yeah.
that paper over the cracks FC. That was the way I kind of put it. And, obviously I hope that's not the case. I hope it's not just a case of paper over the cracks. I hope this is now a case of we can build and grow and move forward. But Naismith needed that. He needed that win last night. The one thing that you didn't mention with the team news was that Boyce and Benny were dropped to the bench. I saw different takes on that and people talking about Boyce and Shankland being unable to play together up front, which I'm
I
not
don't
going to
think
say
that's
they're
entirely true.
unable. I don't think they've clicked again yet. I think they're both very good, talented, intelligent players. But I think in spells and games when they've both been involved, they've kind of both played in the same space, which doesn't help.
No, of course.
So there's maybe an element of that, but they are two very good players, and on their day are two most important players. But I think the pure and simple reason that Boyce and Benny got dropped was because of that absolutely horrendous pitch that Kilmarnock have,
Mm.
and the conditions making it like an ice rink more than a football pitch. But yeah, the George Grant goal came at a good time, like you said. I felt positive at that point, because like you, I didn't get to watch the game. I was at work and couldn't get a signal, so couldn't really keep an eye on anything. So I was relying on the BBC text updates as well as
Oh, of
Twitter
course.
and the Hearts WhatsApp group that I'm involved in. So it's funny when you, like you said about the radio and all that, like I was relying on three different outlets to give me updates, and honestly it was like everyone was watching a different game. It was hilarious. Some people were saying, oh, Devlin's not had a great game, and others were saying, oh, he's been the best player on the park. And people were talking about Alan Forrest and saying, oh, he's murder, and others were saying, no, he's actually done really well. And I'm like,
Mhm.
this is why I
As I
don't.
said, anxiety radio. There you go.
This is why I prefer to just watch a game of football for myself and make my own conclusions. Um, but like I say, the first half, I agree with you. I think we looked a lot better. We looked a lot more on the front foot. We looked a lot more forward thinking. But Kilmarnock had their moments as well. I think George Grant deserves a huge amount of praise as a number 10 that looks forward and plays forward. which was amazing to see. He was drifting around, he was creating problems for the Kilmarnock defence, and it was just refreshing. Like, it was his first start of the season, and he did very well. Linked up with Shanklin very well, played the number 10 role how a number 10 should play the number 10 role, which made a huge difference. But yeah, I think going in at halftime ahead was positive. When Kilmarnock scored again, the most typical Hearts goal to concede that you'll ever see in your life. As much as I love Toby Sibbick, he's got to stop that cross. He's got to stop that cross. He gets wrong footed, and I think it was Armstrong maybe, or
Mm.
the
I
other
think
right
it was
player that
Armstrong,
Kilmarnock
yeah.
had. I was actually very impressed with Armstrong for them. I think he was really really good, as was Vassell to be fair. But yeah, the cross just comes in and it's headed in, and it's so, again, like I said about the St Mirren game, it's so predictable. And when that went to 1-1, I'm sitting there and I'm going, right, you know, how
It's done.
we
Yeah,
respond.
it's done.
Yeah, well, it was kind of like how we respond to this is going to be massive. What happens next is going to be massive in this game, because if we went on and lost, like you said, the toxic levels in the stands would have been increasing massively on the
Mm,
players in Naismith. Because I think, like I said at the start, I don't think the spotlight is on Naismith and the players as much as it's on the board at the moment, which is a
mm,
good thing for Naismith and the players,
mm.
because they can just do their thing. Um, but yeah, I have to say as well, like before we talk about the winner and the match winner, um,
I can't wait for this. Yeah.
Naismith, yeah, Naismith got, again. I'll give him credit. Naismith got his subs spot on.
Hmm.
The annoying one was Devlin going off at halftime. Um, he went off with a knock at halftime, and they brought on Haring. Now, long-term listeners and people that know me know how much I love Peter Haring, and what he has done for Hearts in his time with us. But I fear, well, it's not I fear, I feel like, for the way that Naismith wants that midfield to be, I don't know if Peter Haring has a regular starting place anymore, which is maybe not a bad thing. The one player, again, that I'll speak on as well, Callum Neuenhoff, um,
Yeah.
very good again. Again, like I said about George Grant, driving forward, not afraid to take people on with the ball at his feet, always looking to pass it forward. And if there wasn't a forward pass on, he kept the ball well, he moved it well. Certainly looks like he's growing into that Hearts team. Naismith said in the press conference after that he thought that Callum Neuenhoff was the best player on the park for us, which I can't disagree with. I thought he did really, really well. So, like I said last week or whenever it was, if Peter Haring is becoming that bench player and Callum Neuenhoff's going to be the one that comes in and takes that position, I'll not complain too much, because the early signs of Neuenhoff are that he does the dirty work well, but he's also good at breaking forward and being involved further up, which, again, as much as I love Peter Haring, that's not his game. That is
Mm.
not his game. And if that's what Naismith wants his midfielders to do, Haring can't do it. You know, um, Haring came on, as I say, at halftime. Just quickly before I give you it back, he came on at halftime, got booked in the second half, and I again didn't see what he got booked for. However, I simply said in the WhatsApp group chat, predictable slide tackle, yellow card for Peter Haring. And everyone replied saying, yes, that's exactly what happened. So it was the trademark Peter Haring mistimed tackle that gets him a yellow card again. But yeah, as I say, the substitutions made an impact. The Devlin going off at halftime made a negative impact because the midfield was a wee bit overrun after that. But bringing on Boyce late on, bringing on Lowry late on, obviously made a positive difference. And I'm going to hand it back to you, because trying to be positive and praising is yeah, I'll give you it back.
Well, just before we get on to the county game, obviously you've had your thoughts on Lowry. We've had a difference of like opinion. Like it just holiday all but again. You did have to eat a tiny bit of humble pie where, as soon as they came on, straight away you were, yeah, absolutely not. Get the fuck paper bag, fly away. And then he pops up with that glimpse of
Yeah.
like, was it of the quality, and scores the winner. What were your thoughts, Alan?
I knew you were going to make me talk about it. Now,
Of course, mate.
I everybody knows I've been very critical of Lowry since he's been at Hearts. I haven't seen what he's going to bring to us. To be honest with you, I haven't seen it enough. I don't doubt his technical quality, and I said that when we first brought him in. I thought technically he's a good player, but finding the right position on the pitch for him to play is the biggest part of it. As I said to you, I think I referred to him as an empty crisp packet in the wind, having more mobility than Alex Lowry. And I still stand by that. I still stand by that. But he was in a very good position. The ball from Ofaya to Lawrence Shankland, who just touched it down brilliantly, played it to Boyce, who tried to have a shot, mucked it up, took it back, played it, finally found Alex Lowry. And Naismith had said to him apparently before he went on, go on and be the match winner, go on and show something and be the match winner. And you know what? Fair play to Alex Lowry. That goal sums up exactly what he can do and what he's good at. The ball at his feet, quick movement, the wee drag back, and just a good finish. I think it was Robert Borthwick in commentary that basically said the only part of the goal that was available for him to put the ball into is exactly where he managed to find it.
Mm.
And the goal coming when it did, brilliant. Like the scenes in the away end, people on Twitter have said that the stand was visibly shaking with the Hearts fans going absolutely mental. Whether it was at the prospect of not having to sit through another half an hour in the rain, or genuinely the fact that Alex Lowry scored a last minute winner, it's probably a mixture of the two. But yeah, just a nice way to end it, and it put a good cap on what was a much improved performance from previous weeks.
Absolutely, and obviously as well, that's another trip to Hampden for the semi-finals of the League Cup as well. I believe all the rest of the quarterfinals are being played tonight as we speak, which is a Wednesday. And I'm sure it won't be too long to find out who we will be playing in the semi-final. So just to wrap things up, Alan. Obviously, most likely they're going to get beat. But just to give a quick sort of thoughts, what was it going into Ross County at the weekend, and I would like to have a prediction from yourself as well, please, sir.
Ooh, county prediction, right? I hope for a win. Obviously, it would be nice to add to something. But yeah, county away, tricky. Has the potential to be a tricky game.
Always.
We'll have a few injuries to contend with. Oda, I don't know whether he'll be back or not. Hopefully, but I haven't heard anything. Um, yeah, I'm still. Again, I'm back to that. I'm going to allow myself to be as confident as I can be. We're currently sixth in the table. I was just looking it up quickly there while you were talking. We're sixth in the table with 7 points from 6 games, and County are seventh with the exact same 7 points from 6 games. Their goal difference took a hammering because they got battered by Aberdeen on the weekend. I think it was 4-0 maybe. So hopefully they're still a wee bit fragile after that, and we can turn up and get a result. I have faith in the players that they can do it. I hope, as I say, that last night's result was not just a paper over the cracks moment, and hopefully we can get a result. So to that end, prediction, I'm going to go for my most obvious of predictions because it's the prediction I go with every single week, and one of these days it's going to be right. Last night it was correct with the scoreline, but I didn't predict it. I'm going to go for 2-1 to Hearts.
Good one, mate. Yeah, most likely the same as you. Like I'm actually thinking with my head that I don't usually do in all walks of life. It, there'll be a good energy a wee bit now in the squad, like, considering that it was a cup game, like, like a trip to Hampden, as well. So I'm hoping that will gaslight, was it, if you will, not like in the negative term, but like, it will,
Yeah.
like, was it like it will, was it put a fire, like, sort of there, was it, if you want to use that term in case. But yeah, I think Ross County, again, like, as every, like, away game is always going to be tricky. But again, I hope, not confidently, but I hope that we can bring back a result and put 3 points on the actual board. To that end, I'm actually gonna go for a 2-0 win. I think if we can start the same way as we did against, was it Kilmarnock, straight away, front foot, we have more than enough of the quality to take away 3 points. But like, again, words are cheap, and it's what about sorry, and it's what they actually do on the actual pitch that counts. So yeah, I think, yeah, 2-0, confidence, sir, confidence. And
I
yeah,
like
that
it. I like it.
and that brings us to the end of the 93rd episode of the Since I Was Young podcast. We do hope you have enjoyed it. As always, guys, and as we said at the start, if you haven't subscribed through our YouTube page, please think about subscribing and getting in contact with us via our socials as well. And as always, to everyone that is going to make the long trip to County, we do hope you have a good one and 3 points to bring back as well. So until next time, from myself and Alan, we do hope you have a good one, and we'll see you in the next one. You all take care. Bye for now.